Welcome to the Sigma Empath Podcast Season 2. In this episode, we're diving into somewhat unfamiliar territory to better understand the good, the bad, and the ugly of law enforcement with a retired police officer and detective who reveals the gamut of dark remorse, uplifting, life-changing moments that are almost poetic. As a police officer, in the heat of the moment, is there room, is there time for empathy? And all the way through to a second life of newfound purpose and redemption. Randy, welcome to the show.
I am a 34-year police veteran. I did 10 years as a cop in Princeton, New Jersey, 24 of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, retired at the rank of lieutenant, and done a lot of other things along the way, which I'm sure we'll get into. But what I do now is I founded a nationwide charity, and it's called the Wounded Blue. We're the National Assistance and Support Organization for injured and disabled law enforcement officers, and we've been active for coming up on 6 years and helped more than 14,000 law enforcement officers who've been injured either physically
That is amazing work, and I want to dive and talk a lot about that because the work you do is amazing. But before we get to that, I want to kind of start from the beginning. You were a cop. Why do you, Randy Sutton, why does anybody want to become a police officer? You deal with the dregs of society. You put your life in danger. You have a bad reputation in the eyes of a lot of people. You don't necessarily get the best pay in the world. You, according to the cliche image of the police officer, dysfunctional life at home, romantic life, if they even have a romantic life. Why would you do that to yourself?
Well, let's dissect that a little bit. Remember the time that when I became a police officer was many decades ago, and while the plight of law enforcement has always been similar, what has been taking place over the last number of years with the disrespect, with the defunding, dehumanizing, is on a different level than we ever saw before, and it's important to talk about that. But as far as my motivation when I became a police officer, it was a long, long time ago. And there were a number of reasons why I chose the profession. One is that my grandfather was a deputy sheriff who was shot in the line of duty. He survived, but it was something he was kind of my hero. Also, my folks were both court reporters, and so I used to listen to the tales of crime all the time. But the most important part is what is inside you. What is inside me?
And that's what I want to get to. What's inside of you?
Service. Service is inside me. I've been in service for my entire adult life. I became a volunteer when I was 16 years old. I joined the Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, an all-volunteer rescue squad. Got trained as a well, at that time it was advanced first aid and then EMT. And even at 16, I was being exposed to some horrific scenes of, death and car wrecks and, people shooting themselves. And that was at the age of 16.
Yeah.
But I always knew it was important what I was doing to serve. And then I became the youngest cop in the state of New Jersey at the ripe old age of 19.
Congratulations. So young, so naive.
I look back now, Vital. I look back on some of the decisions I made as a 19-year-old cop. And
hold that thought, because that's a talking point I want to talk about later, about regrets, remorse, highlights, some of those life-changing experiences you might go through for a cop. I want to quickly tap into this level of service. You mentioned when you became a cop, you said it was different.
It was different.
What we're going to talk about later in the podcast is what needs to change today. But let's go back in time. You said that it's changed. What's the short version of what you've seen that has changed in terms of the image for some people of the police officer to what it used to be to what it's become? What changed?
The respect level changed quite a bit. And as a police officer and I remember, I'm going to date myself. I became a police officer in 1976. So I know. most of your listeners will never have been born by
I think
now.
I was watching Chips back then in Europe.
And that was in the 80s.
The
I go
80s.
even further back than that.
Got it, right.
So there was, now it's interesting because the pay was much less,
Yeah.
but the respect level was much more. People respected law enforcement. They respected the decisions. And there was also fear. You know, we talk about, oh, people shouldn't be afraid of the police. I beg to differ. You should be afraid of the police.
Oh, that's an interesting talking point.
I actually wrote an article a couple of years ago called Bring Back the Fear. Because you see, you shouldn't be afraid of contacting me. You shouldn't be afraid of talking to me. But you sure as hell should be afraid of touching me in an inappropriate way.
That makes total sense. Yes, I get that part.
And the differentiation is what has happened is, I call it the pussification of the police.
The pussification, is this an official in-house term?
No, it's a Randyism. It's a Randyism. But it's a very appropriate term because we have emasculated police officers. We have taken tools away from them that are utilized in officer safety, in making arrests. I can't tell you the number of police officers who have been seriously injured or killed because they did not use the appropriate amount of force when they should have. They should have.
So on that note, let me dive in. And I come from a naive perspective because from my armchair, it's easy to judge, right? We're not in the field. You are in the field. You experience, like I said, the dregs of society. You are under threat. You sometimes have split-second decisions. You went into the police force with this romantic notion to serve. Now we're exposed to social media platforms like TikTok, and we're bombarded, inundated with videos of police brutality, police abuse. And I'm kind of ahead of my question because I wanted to save this juicy topic for last, but you know what? We organically went there and you kind of set it up beautifully. So how do you validate or find the balance between we are here to protect and serve, but you better respect my ass because I'm not a pussy. You're using your words. I have not been pussified. You better respect me, but I am going to respect your dignity, your rights, and I'm not going to overstep my boundaries. What do you say to somebody like me who questions, to other people who question, and to those who are like, yeah, we're on board. The police, how do you validate this behavior?
The behavior, I'm not sure.
The sometimes excessive force that police officers might use.
Oh, okay. So do excessive force incidents happen? Of course they do. Do brutality offenses happen? They do. Are they the majority? Absolutely not. Are they few and far between? Yes. But here's the thing. Almost every time you have seen a force that looks to be excessive and an investigation takes place, they find that they are not excessive. But you see, here's the thing. From 15 seconds of videotape, I've seen careers ruined when they did absolutely nothing wrong because of 15 seconds of videotape. No use of force looks good, Vital.
Yeah.
When I want to put the handcuffs on somebody, there's no magic way to do it. If you don't put your hands out after I say, put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest, and you pull your hands away, even that alone is resisting arrest.
Right.
I now have to use force to bring you into custody. It never looks good, Vital. It can't. And so what we see police officers using force. Sometimes it's on a small person. Sometimes it's on a woman. And the first inclination is, well, what's wrong with them? Why are they doing that?
When they say what's wrong with them, what's wrong with the police officer, or what's wrong with
right? What's wrong with the police officer? Why are they hurting that person? And you hear somebody screaming, "Help me, help me," while they're resisting arrest. Even the most appropriate use of force can look bad.
Right.
So the cop is in the no-win situation.
I like how you phrase that. I believe it's a no-win situation, and I want to give you a personal perception because, again, I understand I'm coming from a place of safety here in my office. I live in the suburbs of Las Vegas, relatively safe. Again, going back to the TikTok videos, and I want to give one specific example, and I know that the exception does not make the rule. But I was invited on a podcast with the former Attorney General of Nevada. We're not going to say his name. And I brought up a situation where, and I showed the video, and now you're going to have to take my word for it that my rendition of what happened in the video is purely unbiased, right? Because I have no biases whatsoever. And so there's a black gentleman who obviously has perpetrated a crime, and the video starts when he's got his hands up. And the police officers taser him. My initial perspective is I thought he had his hands up, no longer a threat. But he has his hands up and he's tasered and he falls to the floor, flat on his face, and they grab his hands and they handcuff him. But wait, there's more. They handcuff him and then they unleash a dog on this paralyzed man on the floor. And as the dog is mauling him, and my platform, by the way, is empathy, and we're going to get to empathy, but my empathic soul, I'm watching this happen and it breaks my heart. I'm seeing this dog maul a man who's been arrested, and the police officer's, again, perception looks like he's telling the dog to get off, but dogs are well trained. They should immediately let go. And that breaks my heart. That type of situation, is that one of those situations where it's excessive force and it's not validated and it's the minority, or is that SOP, standard operating procedure, that is simply a part of the job?
I can't begin to comment on it because I literally, you just told me a story, but I don't know what happened before. And I don't know, I can't comment on something I have only verbal information about.
Yeah.
I can tell you this, that if you want to talk about something that's ugly, there's something that's as ugly as it gets in the news right now about law enforcement. And it's the correctional officers in New York who literally just beat an inmate to death.
Oh,
and it's on videotape. It's horrendous to see, horrendous. And I mean, let me tell you, are there instances that literally make you cringe as a cop? And that answer is yes. No police officer wants to be involved in a situation where another cop has gone rogue. And so we've gotten much better, and this is interesting that we bring this up, because the culture has changed. Remember, I've been involved in law enforcement my entire adult life. I'm still involved in law enforcement. I'm not a practitioner, but I'm probably more involved and have more knowledge now than I did when I was a practicing cop. So I know the situation, and because I have a historical perspective, I can tell you that the culture of law enforcement has changed radically since I pinned on the badge back in the 1970s. We hear about systemic racism in law enforcement. That's a term that's been thrown out at us for a long, long time. And I can tell you that from all of my years on the streets, there was much more racist tendencies back in the 70s than exist today.
So we have made progress.
Made tremendous progress. Policing was a lily white profession when I joined the department.
You can say that. I can't say that.
But I mean, white males were the predominant practitioners of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Women were almost non-existent. There were black officers, Hispanic officers, but they were a very deep minority. Now, there is a representation based on the population throughout the ranks of police departments around the country. And this has been a very good thing. So the profession has morphed, if you will, into a much more diverse profession.
Was that by design, or was it just an organic transition in adapting to changing climates, changing social climates?
So if you listen to the social engineers, they'll say that they created it, because there were diversity rules put into place. I think it would have developed organically,
Yeah.
because if given the appropriate amount of time, a culture changes, and law enforcement is no different than that in any other culture. When it comes down to bringing in other parts of our communities into the profession. But let's just say it's happened. Good stuff. But here's what also happened. In many cases, in order to right the wrongs of yesterday,
By the way, I like how you phrase that. Right the wrongs of yesterday. So there is an acknowledgement that there were wrongs, but it's about moving forward. Is that correct? We're looking forward.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, listen, the United States has a checkered past when it comes down to racial equity.
We'll avoid going down that complete rabbit hole, but yes.
So law enforcement is a microcosm of society as a whole. The United States is completely a different place when it comes down to culture and race and the acceptance. I think we've taken absolutely incredible strides.
I agree. I think we can do more. I want to tap into something that
we must never stop doing more.
I love that. We must never stop doing work. Is that how you phrased it?
We should never stop doing more.
I love that.
When I say more, I'm talking about more to adopt society to be successful for everyone.
For everyone. Operative word. I love that. For everyone.
Well, it won't be everyone, because not everyone is capable of performing in society.
This is true. On that note, this ties into emotional intelligence, right? With empathy, the foundation of emotional intelligence, and my platform. And I want to tap into empathy regarding your work. There's an author, a former FBI agent, Chris Voss. He wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it. And he talks about empathy used in interrogations. Now, given this is the FBI, this is in a controlled environment when you've got somebody boxed in, locked down, safe, you can get into their heads. And he calls it tactical empathy. As a police officer, in the heat of the moment, is there room, is there time for empathy?
If you don't have the soul of an empathetic person, you'll never be successful as a cop. You may be able to get through your career. You may even get promoted. But this is one of the most interesting discussions that I've had for years, and that is define success as a cop.
Let's do it.
And you talk to 5 different cops, you'll get 5 different answers. You talk to 5 different chiefs, and you'll get 5 different answers from the 5 different cops that you asked, because everybody gauges success differently. And I mean, I've had the great good fortune of having some mentors throughout my life that I could have this discussion with, because I found it fascinating. I'm going to tell you a story. I think this will define it. Like I told you, I was a young cop, 19. I saw everything in black and white, Vital, everything. And so I took everybody to jail. If you were smoking a doobie, you were going to jail. If you ran that red light, I don't want to hear it. Here's something for you.
Would you take me to jail for fashion violations or anything like that?
If it was in the statute, maybe. But so I was I led the department. I had more arrests personally than the rest of the 30 cops on the department.
Wow.
I had more tickets than the rest of the department put together. I was out there working my ass off, but I also saw everything in black and white. Now, it didn't make me a very popular guy in my little small town because I grew up in that town. So who am I arresting? Kids I went to high school with.
Ooh.
And their parents. Who am I writing tickets to? People I went to high school and their parents. I was not a very popular guy. But the way I viewed it was I was focused. You broke the law, you had to pay the price. And I was hustling, man. I was hustling. Didn't make me a favorite even with my own team members.
Wow.
They thought I was making them look bad. And at one point, believe it or not, I even got in a fist fight with another cop on the edge of town because they thought I was making them look bad. Picture that.
I wish that was a TikTok video right now. Awesome.
That's the way, it was very much like the military. Sometimes you beat each other's asses and then wind up being best friends.
Yeah. I've been in the military. I've been in the Belgian Navy. I understand that concept.
You're right. Exactly. Sometimes that's the way it worked back then. But I saw everything black and white.
But you evolved. You said back in the day, this is who you used to be. I now know you as a civilian. I've never known Randy Sutton, the cop. I've never known, by the way, Randy Sutton, the TV star. We're going to quickly talk a little bit about that, the TV star. But I know Randy Sutton, the man, the human. You are an incredibly compassionate, empathetic man. And this sort of brings me to my next question. What happened to Randy Sutton that you became, or was it always in you, this level of empathy, of compassion? Was it pure wisdom, maturity? Was it remorse, regret? And if so, share those moments of regret and remorse.
I'm going to share because I hadn't finished the story, but you'll see where I'm taking it. So here I am. I think I'm doing the right thing, man. I'm out there busting my ass. And I was assigned a new sergeant. Now, I had known this guy since I was a cadet on the police department. I had great respect for him. He was one of the best cops that I ever met. He was smart. He was courageous. He was honest. He had great integrity. And he was somebody that I really looked up to as a leader. And suddenly, I'm working for him. One day, we're working graveyard shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And we get off work and he says, "Hey, Randy, let's go to breakfast." I said, "Sure." So we go to a New Jersey diner. We're having our breakfast and I'm recounting my evening. Yeah, then I did this. And yeah, this guy, he was an asshole. And he's listening. Well, finally, when I got done, he said, "I got to tell you, Randy, you are really a good cop." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." He said, "You're really a good cop, I'll tell you." He said, "You know the laws. You continually try to improve in your knowledge. You are boundless energy. You are dedicated to the department. You're really a good cop." And now my head is all swelled up, And he said, "But do you know the difference between being a good cop and being a great cop?"
Oh.
And he took me for a surprise on that one. I said, "No." And he kind of got a smile on his face. And he says this one word: compassion. The towel was like somebody turned the light switch on. By saying that one word, and not beating me over the head with it, but leading me to understand what he was saying, changed the way I became a cop forever.
Wow.
Because what he instilled in me was the knowledge that, yeah, I may be technically a good cop because I know the laws, I know the statutes, I'm out there putting people in jail. That's not where it is.
So how are you able to implement that lesson though in real time?
In real time, I evaluated the decisions that I made. And from then on, it wasn't about getting the stats. It wasn't about being, making more arrests or making more, writing more tickets. It was about solving more problems. That's the change. And it literally not only changed the way, excuse me, got a little cold. It not only changed the way I became a cop, it changed the way I then, later in my career, have molded police officers for decades because of that one amazing piece of leadership that led me to understand that compassion and empathy are the qualities that a police officer must have if he's going to be successful by my standards.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Randy? I'm glad I met this version of Randy rather than that asshole back in the day. You talked about leadership and planting seeds. My favorite leadership quote, and this, you've just embodied it. John Quincy Adams, 6th President of the United States, says, if your actions inspire others to dream more, do more, learn more, and become more, you are a leader. So two things happened. Somebody planted a seed for you, and in your example, now inspired others. It's a beautiful story. Going now from that beautiful story, let's get to some dirt. What have been some of, if you're willing to share, by the way, what have been some of the most dark, ugly, regretful, remorseful moments maybe you've had in your career as a cop? And then we're going to go to the beautiful romantic thing on how you're now changing lives with your mission, the Wounded Blue.
Well, there's been a lot of darkness in my career. There's darkness in every cop's career, and if we have to come to terms with it in order to get through a police career and come out on the other side. And you know what I deal with as far as the Wounded Blue. I deal with mental health issues, emotional issues, suicide, literally every single day. But I could not be as effective as I am had I not experienced that darkness too. Law enforcement can beat you down. You literally see some of the worst that humanity has to offer. You see, I mean, listen, I could tell you story after story about the father who came home and put a gun up to his two daughters' heads and blew their brains out. I could tell you stories of the guy that cut his father's head off and stuck it on the cabinet over there so that when I came through the door, his father's head was staring at me. I could tell you the death that I have seen, the hundreds and hundreds of dead bodies taken either by violence, by drug addiction, and the heartbreak that it brings on the survivors, on the others. When you see that for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it has a severe impact upon your very soul. I don't think that you can go unscarred. I don't think it's possible.
So with what you've just shared, I can't imagine. I have empathy, and I can't imagine seeing those horrific things. I can only try and envision. Again, I know the Randy Sutton of today. You've invited me to your house. We've had dinners together. We've had lunches together. You now live a very stable life. You've got cats. You're retired from the force. You've got a beautiful relationship. I see your generosity. Again, I want to get to the Wounded Blue. I see your generosity. You had a heart attack recently. You had surgery. is there a short version of what kept you sane? What kept you alive? I don't mean alive in the force not getting shot. I mean, what kept you emotionally, mentally alive to be now where you are?
That's a very insightful question. And I think that what really kept me through the darkness is my personal vision of how important my job was. That I was making a difference in the lives of other people.
Purpose.
And purpose, exactly. Now remember, I've had some of the most dramatic, I've had life-changing incidents take place to me. One that I think you're aware of, but was a shining beacon for me that kept me through many of the dark times. And this was when I saved the life of a 1-month-old baby who was shot in the face during a drive-by shooting. And she had been hit in the face. I literally came upon the scene. She was a perfectly innocent, of course, she's a month old. The car that she was riding in had been targeted by some gang punks for gang initiation. And they just opened fire on the car indiscriminately. Providence, God, the spirits, whoever you want to give the kudos to, placed me in a position to be there within minutes. And because I was there within minutes, was able to bring her back to life. And no brain damage because I was there so quickly when I gave her mouth to mouth and brought her back to life. That moment changed my life forever in several different ways. But the knowledge that because I was a cop, because I faced the darkness, because I viewed myself as someone who was in all honesty, I consider cops to be the knights errant. That they're there to do good deeds, heroism, and because I was there at the appropriate time and I had the skill to do it, brought that little child back.
Beautiful
story. Changed my life forever. And during the dark times, I would remember her. And by the way, she was with me at Thanksgiving.
No way.
All these years later. Yeah, we're still close.
Wow.
As I am with her parents. I took her to her quinceañera.
That's more beautiful than I'd bargained for.
It was so here's how she changed my life. First of all, I wrote I went home that night, Vital, and I was so moved by having had the ability to bring her back to life that I knew that if I hadn't been there, she was going to die. So I had a direct action that literally changed the world. And I viewed policing from that point of view. I can change the world. Through my actions, through my abilities, I can change the world, and I did change the world. So during some of those very, very dark times, I focused on that. And I believe that was very, very helpful to me in negotiating through some of the quagmire of the darkness.
So what I really like what you said, and I subscribe to this philosophy, by the way, a part of the journey overcoming our darkness is to actually face the darkness, embrace it, learn from it, and then focus on moments of light and hope and beauty. And I do the same, and I hope anybody listening who's struggling, focus on some of those highlights. Focus on the people whose world you have impacted, the ripple effects that you've created. It's a beautiful thing, but we have to acknowledge it and recognize it. Thank you for doing that.
But it also changed my life, Vital, because that night was so impactful to me that I felt like I had to write her story. I had to write that story. And I went home that night and I got my yellow pad out very old school, and my pen, and wrote the story called Her Name Was Jackie. And I didn't have anything to do with it. I just felt I needed to express it. And so,
In terms of writing, I know you blog. You've written a book called Legacy. Is this story, is that a part of the legacy of Randy Sutton?
yes, it is. It's absolutely a part of my legacy. And so I wrote that story and stuck it in a drawer where it sat for 3 years. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just, every time, and I would take it out occasionally and read it and remind me during the dark times. And then one of the darkest things that ever happened to this country took place, and the World Trade Center was attacked, and thousands of people lost their lives, including the deadliest day in law enforcement history, when 72 cops were killed. And I thought about that story that was in that drawer. And I thought, every cop I know has a story like this. I'm going to ask them to write that story. I'm going to put them in a book, and I'm going to donate all of the royalties to the families of those cops who were killed. And that's exactly what I did. And it's that, you can see it, I believe, in the background. Yeah, right there.
If you can, Randy, if you have a picture of that by any chance, I'd love to insert that into the, yes.
That was called True Blue, Police Stories by Those Who Have Lived Them. And that changed my road forever, because it from that book, the editor-in-chief at St. Martin's Press asked me to write all my own stories. Yeah. And that was my second book that's still available, called A Cop's Life. And in fact, now my new podcast that I just launched a couple months ago is called A Cop's Life. And it's all these stories from police officers themselves that show a completely different perspective about them.
I will put the link to your podcast in the description below. People, go check it out. I've heard endless of your stories. I want to go back to legacy. There's this beautiful sentimental legacy you just shared, but there's also the TV superstar celebrity cop legacy. Tell us real quick about that.
So when I made the decision to leave Princeton, I was halfway to retirement. I was a detective. I was at the top of my pay grade, and I was literally halfway to retirement. And I made the decision to leave. And all my compatriots said, "Randy, you're out of your mind. You're halfway to retirement." Remember, I started at 19. I could have retired when I was 45. Excuse me, 44. In fact, the man who was my mentor, who gave me that piece of advice, compassion, was now a lieutenant, and came to me and said, "Randy, don't leave, because after down the road, you're going to be the chief of police." And I got to tell you, I had to do some deep soul searching. Is that what I want? And I made the decision, I'm not being challenged here. So I started all over again as a cop in Las Vegas. I had to go through the academy again. If I didn't pass the academy, I was screwed, because there was no going back. And it was a decision I never looked back on. And that's because of doors opened to me that were completely unexpected. And the TV show Cops was one of them. In 1989, I'd been a member of the Metro Police for 3 years. And this new show comes on called Cops. And
is that the one that was the bad boys?
That's the one.
No way.
Yes.
I gotta YouTube this. I gotta Google this.
Oh, well, you could see, I wound up becoming one of the most featured officers on the show. 1989 was the first season I was on as a patrolman. And then again in 94, again in 96, and I've been in 3 of their specials. So that opened doors in many different ways, including that's how I got a role in the movie Casino.
You were in Casino.
I was in the movie Casino. So what happened was a casting director had seen me on Cops. And when they were filming Casino in Vegas, I get a phone call saying, hey, there's going to be a film shot in Vegas, and the director is looking for realism in the part of a cop. Would you come down to an audition? And I'm always up for an adventure, as you know. So I go to the old Riviera Hotel, and I walk in to this suite, and who's standing there but Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese. And
Wow.
and
Do you have a Robert De Niro impersonation by any chance?
no, I don't. And that's how I got the part. And I've been doing
Awesome.
movies and TV ever since.
And in many ways, it's allowed you, because I know now as a part of your platform, and I'm heading to maybe the most important part of your work that you do now is the Wounded Blue. But maybe this sort of TV experience has lent to your comfort. I know that you are a contributor oftentimes on Fox News and things like that. Half of my audience just went boo. Half of them just went yay. Never mind. We hear about not division. We hear about commonality and bringing people together. So your career ends. You retire. Give us the short version. What does retirement feel like? Because you went from this asshole cop to compassion, and now the sense of purpose that you found is gone. What happens to a cop who retires?
Well, it was much more dramatic than just leaving. The method of my transition altered my life forever. So I was a lieutenant. Now, the reason I never promoted to anything other than anything higher than lieutenant was because that's the highest street rank. You can't go out on the road after that. You're an administrator, and that's not my forte. So, and I spent my entire lieutenant's career on graveyard shift, because in Vegas, that's where the action is.
Yeah.
So I was a very active street lieutenant. And so I could still be a cop. And when I was the watch commander, which meant I was the highest ranking officer on the department on that shift, I would take a patrol officer with me so I could get to know my people, and I could get to show them that their lieutenant actually knew how to do some police work now and then. So on this particular night, the last night of my career, I was driving down Las Vegas Boulevard with this young officer, talking to him like I'm talking to you right now. And suddenly I found myself talking slower. And I literally felt my brain slowing down. And I knew that I was having a stroke. And I stopped the police car in the middle of the road right in front of Bally's Hotel. And I said to this young man, get me medical, I'm having a stroke. And I got out of the car to go around to the passenger side in case he needed to get me to the hospital. And I started speaking gibberish. I had no control over it. And I knew I was speaking gibberish, but I couldn't do anything about it. And then I lost the ability to speak altogether. And then I lost the ability to move, and I crumpled to the pavement. And I lay there helpless. And as I lay there helpless, tourists are walking by me taking my picture. I wasn't afraid of dying, Vital. In fact, I was praying.
That's not a part of the topic, but I want to quickly tap into that. You weren't afraid to die. Is that because of you'd faced death multiple times, and this was just? I had that experience in Cirque du Soleil. I want to quickly share my experience. In one of the acts, the short version, I'm falling from my aerial act, falling to the ground, thinking this is it. And I found a strange level of peace. Everything went slow, everything went calm, and I'm like, hey, this is actually not a bad way to go. And I was at peace. What was that moment of peace for you? Because we fear death.
Well, that's a two-part question. Where I was on this particular night, I was fearing life, but I was fearing life as a prisoner of myself, unable to move, unable to talk. And I was praying to die. I lost my fear of death many years before that during a gunfight that I never should have survived. That's another story. But on this particular night, on the last night of my police career, as I lay there helpless, I had accepted, and I was praying to God to die. And the angel that's been on my shoulder for my entire career was with me again that night. And the clot went through my brain. It left some damage, but certainly not what it could have. But it ended my police career. And it was not anything that I had prepared for. I thought I had another 6 or 7 years of good, solid work in me. And suddenly, everything, well, 3 weeks before that, my mother died in my arms. 2 months before that, I was involved in a fatal shooting. So there was a lot at play here. But when the smoke cleared, they diagnosed me with a severe heart condition. And the day they discharged me from the hospital, the doctor said, "How you feeling, Randy?" I said, "Tell you the truth, I feel pretty damn good." And he said, "I'm glad you do, but I don't want you to walk out of here thinking that this couldn't happen to you again in 5 minutes when you walk out that door. You need to think about your own mortality." And that wasn't what I had anticipated at all.
But it's a powerful message for the listeners. We need to think about our mortality without fearing,
Yes.
but understanding life is precious. What can you do with that life? What value can you bring to this to community?
Yes.
You open the door to so many talking points. It's insane. But I want to take this moment to maybe this is leading to where ultimately the work you do with the Wounded Blue. Again, as an empath, what you do is, for me, truly heroic. You've turned your experiences, your pain, into a newfound purpose, and it ties into what you started in the beginning, being of service. You created this foundation of the Wounded Blue. Before we talk about the Wounded Blue, I just want to quickly tap into something that you did for a wounded police officer in Ferguson, Travis Brown, wounded in the line of duty. Can you just give us the short version of what you did and the ripple effect that creates for his family, the community? And by the way, he's a Black police officer.
So Ferguson, of course, was the epicenter of the insanity, the greatest lie ever perpetuated about police. Hands up, don't shoot, which never occurred. And yet the city's burned, lives were lost, respect for law enforcement was diminished demonstrably, all because of the lie that was told about Michael Brown when he was killed by a Ferguson police officer. Well, those reverberations are still felt to this day. And on the anniversary of Michael Brown's death in August, just this last August, a bunch of people came out to cause trouble and try and create another riot. Ferguson police officers were there. Officer Travis Brown, a young man with a stellar law enforcement history, was monitoring what was going on, taking no action other than monitoring the situation, and he was attacked from behind. When he fell, he hit his head.
I've seen the video. Yeah, basically he gets bundled. Yeah,
and receives a traumatic brain injury and is in a coma for months. He begins to come out of the coma, but will have to relearn his entire life, and they don't know the extent of what those capabilities will be. It's a heartbreaking story. He has 2 young children. And one of the things that the Wounded Blue does is we call it our Wounded Blue Christmas. And we make Christmas happen for the families of injured officers who are financially strapped because of their injuries. And literally, I'll fly to someone's house and I'll give them enough money to buy presents for their kids. That's what we do. So, knowing this situation with this officer, I was going to give him $1,000 for, not him, but his mom, $1,000 for Christmas presents for their kids. But then I had a donor who I was talking about this situation. He said, "Randy, you're not going to give him $1,000. And I said, "I'm not." He said, "No, you're going to give him $5,000. And he says, "I'm going to send it to you." So I make arrangements with the Ferguson police, and I'm going to fly down to Ferguson, and I'm going to give the family $5,000 to help defray expenses, get Christmas presents, make their life a little bit easier. And, you know, when you talk about empathy and you talk about where life takes us, this situation that took place here is something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. I'm in Ferguson now. I'm literally on my way to the police department. And I stop for breakfast and I get a phone call.
Donuts? Were donuts involved?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, now you mentioned it. And I get a voice on the phone who I don't know. And he said, you know, Randy, I've been thinking, $5,000 will not change that family's life. But $5,000 a month for a year will. Make it happen. So I walked into that room at the Ferguson Police Department with family members, with people who just cared from the town, the media, and I made that announcement, and you could hear the whole place gasp. And now the Wounded Blue, my life will now be involved with the life of Travis Brown from now on.
And by the way, just to clarify, you initially gave a check of $5,000 and that $5,000 became $60,000. Insane. Yeah. Randy, if people want to learn more, get involved, donate, contribute to the Wounded Blue, I'm going to put the link in the description. How do they find you? How do they donate? How do they get involved?
Very, very easy. Our website is thewoundedblue.org. Thewoundedblue.org. There's a donate button at the top of that. They can give that way. They can send us a check. And if people want to do more, if they want to become a corporate sponsor, if they want to, go more, or they want more information from me, I'm really easy to find. I'm Randy at thewoundedblue.org. And I'm open. My door is open all the time. I talk to folks. I'll talk 24/7 about this organization.
And I know, and I've seen, I've experienced your love and your passion and belief in this purpose. In closing, Randy, I just want to say I'm so glad that once upon a time, Asshole Cop was touched by the seed of compassion. You've become this beautiful, kind human being that is making substantial impact on society. And for that, I salute you. I honor you. And by the way, over the years, we've had our disagreements. We don't see eye to eye on everything. And I want to make it clear that my objective today was not to have a disagreement. It was for people to understand a different perspective of what a police officer, the journey goes through, the daily challenges. And you've really allowed people to experience what it's like from the other side, not just the TikTok side. So, Randy, it's a pleasure. I look forward to hanging out, having breakfast with you again, and take care of those cats. Say hi to your beautiful lady, and thank you.
Well, there's one thing you got to know. The asshole still exists within.
This I know. Oh, so here's the thing. Good point in closing for my people as empaths. You can be kind, you can be caring, but there has to be a warrior that is willing to mess people up if necessary. Yes, Randy, absolutely. Don't mess with the kind. Don't mess just because a man has compassion, a woman has compassion. They are not a warrior. Beautiful way to end it. I will not mess with you, Randy.
And I invite everyone to come listen to my podcast, A Cop's Life, on Spotify and Apple, on all of the platforms.
Sounds great. Randy, peace out.
Great talking to you, Vital.